Okay, let's unpack this. May 12th, 2025, President Trump signs an executive order,
Right.
and the stated goal is lowering drug prices. Now, you'd think, okay, pharma stocks probably take a hit,
That's the logical assumption, yeah.
but something kind of weird happened. HIMS, the telehealth company, and Amazon, their stocks actually went up.
Yeah, quite significantly.
So we need to dive into why this seemingly, well, counterintuitive reaction happened in the market.
It is fascinating, isn't it? That contradiction. An order supposedly pushing prices down, but these two companies, one telehealth, one this huge online retailer with a pharmacy arm.
They get a boost.
Exactly. So our mission here, looking at a report covering the order and the market move that day, is to figure out that puzzle. What does it tell us about, where drug pricing and access might be headed?
All right, so let's start with the order itself. What exactly did it say? What were the mechanics?
So in essence, the order told the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to roll out a most favored nation policy.
Most favored nation. Okay. I usually hear that term with like international trade deals. How does that apply to drugs?
It's the same principle, really.
Yeah.
The idea is to look at what Medicare Part B pays for certain drugs.
Okay, Part B. Those are the ones you get in a clinic, right? Like infusions.
Exactly. Drugs administered by a healthcare professional, not the ones you pick up at the pharmacy.
Got it.
And the policy aimed to align those Part B payments with the lowest prices paid for the same drugs in other similar developed countries.
So basically, the U.S. shouldn't pay more than the lowest price paid by comparable wealthy nations.
That's the core idea. The stated goal was definitely to reduce the cost burden, both for patients and for the government, because U.S. prices are often, well, much higher.
And just to reiterate, the focus was really squarely on those Medicare Part B drugs.
Primarily, yes, that was the direct target. And it's worth noting this wasn't entirely out of the blue. It was kind of a revival of an idea from the previous Trump administration.
Right, I remember something about that, and I bet the drug manufacturers weren't exactly thrilled to see it come back.
Oh, definitely not. You're spot on.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical industry, they've consistently fought against these kinds of price controls.
Yeah.
They argue it hurts profits, obviously, but also that it stifles innovation and the money needed for R&D for developing new drugs.
Okay, so that's the backdrop. The order is signed. Then comes the market reaction, the million-dollar question here. Why did HIMS and Amazon stocks jump? It seems so backward.
It really does seem surprising on the surface. Despite this move to lower prices, HIMS and Amazon stocks saw these, well, pretty notable gains on May 12th.
How much are we talking?
HIMS went up around 9% roughly. It closed near $56.62, up from about $51.96 the day before.
Wow, 9%. Okay. And Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon also had a strong day, up about 7.6%. It went from around $193.3 to over $207.
That's a big move for a company that aversive.
It is, and it suggests the market is seeing something, maybe a fundamental shift affecting these specific kinds of players.
And the timing of these spikes, did it line up with the news of the order?
It looks like it did, yeah. If you look at the trading during the day, HIMS peaked around 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Amazon hit its high maybe a little earlier, around 9:30 a.m. Eastern.
Okay.
And the estimates are that the order was signed around 9:30 a.m. Eastern, which is 10:000 p.m. in Japan. So the timing lines up pretty closely.
So it really points to the order being the trigger.
It seems highly likely, yes. The correlation is very strong.
All right, so these two companies, not traditional big pharma, see their stocks surge on news meant to lower drug prices. What's the thinking? What's the connection the market made?
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. The key seems to be what these companies actually do, their main business focus.
Right.
Both HIMS, through its telehealth platform, and Amazon Pharmacy, they primarily deal with retail prescriptions.
Ah, the stuff you get filled at a pharmacy and take it home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is, a different category from the Medicare Part B, directly targeted by the executive order.
Okay, so they weren't the direct target. That makes sense. But why the positive reaction? Why would their stock go up?
Well, the market seems to have been reading between the lines, looking at potential indirect effects down the road.
Like what?
One big interpretation could be an expectation that, okay, if there's pressure on Part B prices, maybe, just maybe, that eventually leads to lower drug prices across the board.
Sort of a ripple effect?
Kind of. The thinking might be pressure in one area could eventually force broader price concessions from manufacturers, and if prices generally come down.
How does that help HIMS and Amazon specifically? Wouldn't lower prices mean less revenue?
Well, not necessarily for them. If the cost of acquiring the drugs they sell goes down,
Their procurement costs.
precisely, lower procurement costs mean potentially better profit margins for HIMS and Amazon. Or it could allow them to pass some savings on, making their prices even more competitive for you, the consumer.
Okay, so lower input costs is one angle. That makes sense. What else?
Another factor is probably access. If drugs become more affordable overall, potentially more people can actually afford the treatments they need.
Right. Increased demand.
Increased demand. And who's well-positioned to capture that demand, especially from people looking for convenience and potentially lower costs?
Companies like HIMS with telehealth and direct shipping, and Amazon with its huge logistics network.
Exactly. They're set up perfectly for a larger market, seeking easy, potentially cheaper ways to get medications. It fits their model.
So it's almost like the market saw this executive order, even though it wasn't directly aimed at them, as kind of validating their whole approach, a sign that maybe their disruptive model is the future.
That seems to be a big part of the sentiment, yeah. A feeling that, okay, the future might involve lower prices generally, and these companies are built to thrive in that environment. So investors jumped in, pushing up demand for the stock.
Interesting. So a bet on their future success in a changing landscape. But, I mean, this isn't a sure thing, right? What are the potential roadblocks or uncertainties for HIMS and Amazon here?
Oh, definitely not a sure thing. There are some pretty significant uncertainties floating around.
Like what? What could go wrong for them?
Well, first off, legal challenges.
Hmm.
We already mentioned the pharma industry's opposition.
Right.
Policies like this most favored nation concept have faced serious legal fights in the past. This order could easily get tied up in court, delayed, or even struck down entirely.
Okay, so the policy itself might not even stick. What else?
Then there's the scope. If the policy really does end up only applying strictly to Medicare Part B drugs, the direct impact on HIMS and Amazon's retail business might be pretty minimal in the long run.
Right, it needs to have that broader ripple effect you mentioned to really benefit them significantly.
Exactly. If it expands beyond Part B, then the implications for their cost and the market become much, much bigger.
And what about competitors? Traditional pharmacies aren't just going to roll over, are they?
No way. You have to consider how the competition reacts. Brick-and-mortar pharmacies, other telehealth companies, they'll adapt. They might find ways to compete more effectively online, negotiate different deals, or offer new services.
So the competitive landscape could shift in ways that might blunt HIMS and Amazon's advantage.
It absolutely could. It's a dynamic situation.
Okay, lots of ifs and buts for the long term. But looking back at that specific day, May 12th, the market's immediate vote was pretty clear, wasn't it?
It really was. That sharp, immediate rise in both HIMS and Amazon stock. It strongly suggests that investors, at least initially, saw this news as a net positive, specifically for these kinds of business models.
And for HIMS, you could argue their telehealth focus makes them particularly interesting in this context.
That's a great point. HIMS is already riding that wave of telehealth growth. Lower drug prices could just accelerate that by making the whole package online consult plus affordable delivered medication even more attractive.
More appealing to more people.
Right. Expand the customer base.
And for Amazon, it's got to be about their logistics, right? Their
Yeah,
ability to deliver efficiently.
Absolutely. Amazon Pharmacy can leverage that incredible established delivery network. If drug costs decrease, they're in a prime position to offer very competitive prices and scale up their market share quickly.
Now, just to play devil's advocate for a second, could something else have caused those stock jumps on May 12th? Was there other major news?
It's always possible other factors are at play, broader market sentiment or some other company news we missed. But the report we looked at didn't highlight any other major specific catalysts for HIMS or Amazon that day.
Okay.
So while you can never be 100% certain it was only the executive order, the timing and the lack of other obvious drivers make it the most likely candidate by far. The connection seems pretty direct.
So bringing this all together, we have an executive order aiming to lower drug prices, which seems like it should hurt companies involved with drugs.
Right.
But instead, it gives a boost to a telehealth company and an online retail giant moving into pharmacy.
That really is the core takeaway, isn't it? It shows how policy changes can have these complex, sometimes unexpected ripple effects. The market looked past the direct target and saw potential downstream advantages for companies operating differently in the retail space.
It really highlights those intricate connections.
Definitely.
This whole thing leaves me wondering, and maybe you listening are thinking this too, does this reaction signal a deeper market belief? A belief that maybe the future of getting your prescriptions filled lies more with these direct-to-consumer online platforms, almost like regardless of what happens with traditional pharma pricing pressures.
That's a really provocative thought.
And if that's the case, what does that mean for how you might get your medications 5, 10 years down the road? Something to think about.